again, and then we'll send you to a breakout room to debrief. Dave, can you hear that? Okay.
Fluency is far from the most complex of all the reading skills. Maybe that's why I decided to do research in it. However, so I keep thinking, because it's not the most complex skill, there'll be a time when we all know this, right? We don't need to talk about this anymore, but we're not there yet. What we seem to have heard out in the field is that, yes, fluency is very important. Unfortunately, too many people believe somehow, for a variety of reasons, we can kind of figure out why, but they believe fluency is getting their students to read as fast as possible. So my job now seems to be to help correct that, to maintain the correct notion that fluency is an essential, it's one of the foundational skills for our students. But it's not about fast reading. It's about reading that has three components. But the first is not the speed, it's the accuracy of reading. Fluency, the foundation of fluency is that accuracy piece. So really emphasizing that. Then that next piece, the speed piece, or what we prefer to call the rate piece, is to layer that on top of accuracy to help our children be able to read so easily, so well, with good expression, the third piece, that it allows them to access comprehension. That's what it's all about. Fluency is important, foundational, only because it's one of the access points to comprehension. So my takeaway from my talk is that fluency is not about reading fast, but that fluency is important, but the key component of it is accuracy. And then we talk in a little bit more sophisticated way about the rate. Sometimes you should speed up, sometimes you should slow down, but the sweet spot is to help children be able to read at the rate at which they speak. And that's all about comprehension, because our brain is wired, if you will, psychologists hate that term, but wired to make sense of, to comprehend information that comes in at the rate of speech. If information comes in too slowly, our brain just can't make sense of it. If information floods in and comes too fast, our brain can't make sense of it. It has to come in, it's language-based information, it has to come in at the rate of spoken language. That's the sweet spot for most of our reading. Sometimes we can read faster. We're just reading for entertainment. Sometimes we need to read much slower. But that's my takeaway of fluency. It is very important. It is essential for comprehension, but it's not about reading fast.
All right. So again, as promised,
Here we go. So my name is Mary Newton. I'm representing the Reading League Wisconsin this evening.
So as promised, I'm going to send you to breakout rooms. And then when you're in that breakout room, you'll see in your note taker the following question. What is essential about reading fluency, and what makes someone a fluent reader? So I'll make those breakout rooms. Then if you can go ahead and participate in one of those, and then we'll come back in about 4 minutes. When you do join that breakout room, it would be helpful if you go ahead and kind of humanize the experience a little bit and maybe tell people where you work, what you teach, and then go ahead and answer that question. And go ahead and join one of those rooms now that they've been created. And we'll see you at about 2:16. Thank you, Mr. Brandkamp, for continuing to post that note taker for everybody.
You got it, my friend.
And it looks like a couple of people never connected. And then Amanda and Mario, if you see a breakout room, you may want to join that now.
We still have 2 more coming in. I don't know if they just never came in because they've been in for a while.
Yeah, the 17024.
Yeah.
Or they're just on different devices at this point.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is that day and age, isn't it?
So what are you doing in Texas right now?
I sit on the U.S. Masters Swimming Board. And I was one of the chairs of the set. So this is their annual meeting. So we had rules and election of new officers for the coming 4 years, all that, typical stuff of a board. But I told Janie, I said, I can do the afternoon. I cannot do the morning because my stuff's in the morning and I'll just disappear. So I'm sitting in a hotel room, but it's no problem. It's kind of fun. I'm like, oh my God, I got Aaron. That's cool. I know our presenter.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if you remember Tori Palmer, but her daughter's going to be swimming for, I think, UC Davis.
Oh my gosh. Good.
Yeah.
Good program. Yeah.
And then they moved to Truckee specifically so that she could be part of the UC system if their kids didn't become scholarship athletes. But
yeah,
I think both girls will end up being scholarship of some kind.
That's pretty awesome. UC Davis is fun. It's a good spot. And if they stay in that area, they have like one of the largest master's programs in the country. It's amazing. They're a phenomenal group, but that's cool. Yeah. No, you have people from all over. I told Janie, I said, I hope, and it has worked out great because it's a nice day, but man, this morning we had one of those, because I'm not from this area, obviously, but everybody goes, oh, this is typical southern thunderstorm. It was shaking the building. I was like, okay. My phone's going, that lightning bolt was 0 kilometers away from you. I'm like, yeah, no kidding.
In this last minute, I'm going to take these 3 people. I'm going to put them in the waiting room, and then if they want to try to request to come back in.
You got it.
Okay. And maybe, well, put them in there.
You want me, when you bring him back, I will admit him again, but I'm not going to admit him until then unless.
Okay.
So right now, nothing's happening. Because otherwise they're just going to appear back with you and I. Like, hey, we just got rid of you. We don't know where you go.
Send a message.
Has it been a good day for you?
Pretty low key, grading stuff, of course.
Oh, okay. Of course. Yeah. Great topic, though.
Well, especially, I don't know how much you messed around with ChatGPT, but I don't know if school districts fully appreciate what's possible.
Well, that's half, isn't it true? I mean, like, all the different platforms and all those different tools we're getting. The AI today has been off the board. I mean, at least I could see chat, and I'm like, good lording. It's like, because people, I mean, they just don't. I mean, we do it too. We don't realize all of a sudden somebody goes, "Did you know that Teams will do this or that?" And you're like, "No." So,
all right, I'm going to close these rooms.
You got it, but
shoot, it's a 60-second countdown. All right, well, next time I'll know.
Yeah, when I start seeing them, I'll take myself off.
Oh, good. All right, looks like I got everybody back. So I hope you had an opportunity to sort of debrief, talk about what is essential about reading fluency, and more importantly, what makes somebody a fluent reader, which then bridges to the following, our objectives. So what I hope you take away from this is, 1, understand why fluency is an area that you'll want to yield some instructional time to in your classroom. Consider why Reader's Theater is one vehicle to really promote fluency. And then what I'm also going to hint at is a way of getting to your content, especially if you're at the secondary level. And then finally, we'll explore how ChatGPT can elevate fluency in your outcome, and then also allow for Reader's Theater to take really root in your room. So if you haven't ever seen the following or something like it, I want you to look closely at this model of reading instruction. So this comes from Dr. Tim Rosinski, and we're going to hear from him in just a moment. But I want you to look carefully at it, and I want you to think for a moment, what does it mean, and what does the model really describe? And if you notice again, this model for you is available in your note taker. So if you've printed that out or if you need to refer back to it later, you can. And this idea of looking at the model first kind of borrows from research on what are called worked examples. So we're thinking about what is really described with these arrows, with the lettering, some of these terms we're familiar with. What does it mean, and what does the model describe? And very briefly, I'm going to send you to a breakout room. I'll send you there. See if you can sort of remind yourself, what does it mean and what does it describe? Mr. Brandcamp, it looks like somebody wants that reposted. The note taker, that is. So you go to that breakout room, have that very short conversation, and then we'll send you right back so then we can hear from Dr. Tim Rosinski, who will unpack what it means and what it describes. All right, so join that room, and then we'll bring you back pretty quickly. And it looks like I didn't lose anybody and you're all back. So fluency is sort of interesting. If you're familiar with organizations like AEI or Education Week, Fordham Foundation does something similar, but each year they do what's hot in education. And for some reason, fluency has never made it. So if you're unfamiliar with who Dr. Tim Rosinski is, he is considered kind of the godfather of fluency. He's done tremendous work in this field. If you are, I think Clark County at one point, certainly Washoe County has used Houghton Mifflin resources. He tends to be the consultant on those materials. And when we say what's hot in education, like currently it's things like artificial intelligence, trauma-informed, culturally responsive practices, restorative practices. Before that, it was things like blended learning, deep learning, close reading made it one year. And somehow over the past 25 years, although we make these lists, fluency has never made it, much to his frustration. And so we're going to hear from Dr. Tim Rosinski unpack this model Admittedly, it's a little bit awkward because we're joining the middle of a presentation, or in this case, we're going to join at minute 10:14. And also understand that this was a webinar that was recorded for educators in the United Kingdom. So we'll listen to this for about 3 minutes. And again, I want you to think about the following. Brzezinski shares the problem around, consider what Brzezinski shared around the problem and comprehension. What are you already doing around fluency to address the problem? And I think this is just born of experience, which is, I think, educators, largely speaking, do not get called out for the incredible things they already do in your classroom. So this will be an opportunity in a moment, once he shares the value of it and he unpacks this model, to remind the people that you'll end up in a breakout room with about the good things you're already doing. And so once again, we have note taker here. So if you need to retrieve the question or the model, that's available to you. So.
So that was my first thing I want to mention to you, is these rhythmical texts, to bring them in. And as I said, we'll come back to them in just a second. I'm going to start, first of all, with a problem here in the United States. And I would argue also true in the United Kingdom and around the world, the English-speaking world. And the problem is reading achievement. What you're looking at here is a chart that reflects our fourth graders here in the USA, our reading achievement over from 1992 to 2019. These are fourth graders or 10-year-olds. One of the things you should notice is things haven't changed over those 27 years. Pretty flat, despite wonderful efforts that have been made at every levels of our government, as our school systems here in the United States. So despite these efforts, we haven't seen much in the way of improvement. And not only that, not only lack of improvement, we know that about 2/3 of our children are reading at a level that is considered just basic or below basic. 2/3 that are not even at a level considered proficient. So we've got our work cut out for us here in the United States. And my conversations with colleagues in the United Kingdom indicates that it's not much different there for you folks as well. So here's my model of reading. My model of reading says that comprehension is the goal of reading. But to get to comprehension, we have to master two of these foundational skills: word study, which includes phonics, spelling, vocabulary, and reading fluency there. And I'd like to share with you a study that was done several years ago by a colleague of mine, Sheila Valencia, at the University of Washington in Seattle. And she looked at children who performed poorly, third and fourth graders, 9 and 10-year-olds who performed poorly on these mandated reading tests that we have here in the United States. These are tests that children read passages silently and they answer some questions to test their comprehension. And she was interested in the children who perform poorly, basically asking the question, why are these children having problems with silent reading comprehension? And here's what she found. 75 to 90% of these kids who exhibit problems in reading comprehension also exhibited problems in word recognition, both phonics and vocabulary, word meaning, and also reading fluency, that area that's highlighted green, the ability to recognize words automatically and the ability to express yourself in oral reading with good expression. Imagine that upwards of 90% of our 9 and 10-year-olds here in the United States have problems in reading comprehension, or who have problems in comprehension have problems that are actually related to those skills prior to that, word study and reading fluency. So this is what I'd like to chat with you about today: teaching fluency and to some extent word study, not because they are in and of themselves important, although they are, but more importantly because they will improve reading comprehension, the goal of reading here. So,
all right. So Brzezinski has set you up on describing the model, describing the problem, and then I'm going to send you to that breakout room where you're going to unpack that question that was shared just a moment ago. In this case, the idea of what are you already doing around fluency to address this problem of kids not necessarily comprehending what they're reading. So we'll make those breakout rooms. We'll give you about 3 or 4 minutes to unpack that, and then we'll bring you back. All right, so welcome back. We were prompted to sort of think about the problem, think about the things that we're already doing in our classroom. And before we leave the Rosinski piece, I do want to share you one more segment from that. Because again, this sets up what Fluency helps us with, the problem that is solved, and then he's going to be in to hint at things that we can be doing in our rooms in order to maximize the success for our students. So one more time, we'll go return to kind of the presentation. In this second segment, I want you to consider the following as Rosinski is sort of describing some situations. And in this case, he's going to build that case for fluency that includes automaticity and prosody. And what evidence and examples does he use to support his claim? And one more time, there is in the note taker this same question as well as this visual to support the content itself. So I'm going to stop share there. And then we'll go ahead and share this last video of Dr. Tim Rosinski, I think.
Get them there. So we want to teach word study. But if you look at this little model of reading that I started with, this one here, there's a big gap between word study and comprehension. Something's missing. And of course, that something is reading fluency. So let's jump right into reading fluency right now. It's kind of a bridge. It's actually been described as a bridge between word recognition and comprehension at the other end here. Now, it's actually made up of two sub-competencies, fluency is. Automaticity and word recognition and prosody and expressiveness. And that's what complicates it a little bit because it's actually these two separate things. Automaticity is the ability to recognize words so effortlessly, so automatically, that when a student is reading, several books. But what I want to tell you is that I wrote the chapter on reading fluency for the Handbook of Reading Research. And the reason why I mention that is we here in the United States, and I think in the UK, are focusing on the science of teaching reading. And what I can tell you is there's a...
All right, somebody just said they couldn't hear. So let me try it again.
It cut out for just a short period, then came back on. Aaron. I don't know what happened. But we were all messaging the same. I was asking you to unmute, and because it showed up muted on our screen.
All right, let me just go back to this piece, and then we won't go too far back in time for you. And then give me a thumbs up, Dave, if you get to hear this.
At the other end here. Now, it's actually made up of two sub-competencies, fluency is. Automaticity and word recognition and prosody and expressiveness. And that's what complicates it a little bit because it's actually these two separate things. Automaticity is the ability to recognize words so effortlessly, so automatically, that when a student is reading, they're not really paying attention to the words. The words are automatically recognized, and what that means is students can devote their attention to comprehension where it really needs to be here. I'd like to tell you that I wrote the book on reading fluency, but actually I've written several books. But what I want to tell you is that I wrote the chapter on reading fluency for the Handbook of Reading Research. And the reason why I mention that is we here in the United States, and I think in the UK, are focusing on the science of teaching reading. And what I can tell you is there's a good, solid base of science that supports fluency. In fact, our U.S. Department of Education did a study just a couple years ago, and they found in this study with 10-year-olds that there is a relationship, a strong relationship between comprehension and reading fluency. So that's something that we know is important. We know the National Reading Panel in the United States identified it as one of those key elements here. We have a standards here in the United States, and reading fluency is among those standards. I'm going to go back here just for a second, and you'll notice that this standard is grades 1 through 5 or ages 6 through 11. But do you think if students get beyond age 11 and they're not fluent readers, you know, it's that problem disappears? And of course, it becomes a challenge. It becomes an albatross that hangs around their neck all the way, perhaps for the rest of their lives. Here's a study we did with secondary school students, children who are teenagers having difficulty with reading fluency. So as I mentioned, this notion of automaticity, the ability to recognize words so automatically, so effortlessly that you don't pay attention to the words as much as you pay attention to the meaning of the text. I'm going to give you a little test here. So you're going to have to really focus on the screen here. I'm going to show you some words, and your job is simply to read these words, okay? So if you're ready, I'm going to do a countdown, and you read them. So here we go. 3, 2, 1. Did you get the word? Dog, okay. 3, 2, 1. President, okay. 3, 2, 1. Canada, okay. Here's one more. This is actually 2 words, so might be a little more challenging. 3, 2, 1. You didn't have any trouble with that one, did you? United Kingdom. Okay, one more. 3, 2, 1. Did you get that one? I hope you had a little bit of trouble with that one. The word is biblioclept. It's a real word, and what it means is somebody who steals books. I hope maybe to some extent we're all bibliocleps. Well, what's going on here? What's going on here? Well, with those first 4 words, you recognize those automatically. And if they were in a text, you could devote your attention to comprehension, the meaning that the author was trying to tell you. However, with biblioclept, yeah, you could sound it out, you could figure out the meaning of it, but you'd have to use a little bit more energy, mental energy, mental capacity. And that is now mental energy that cannot be devoted to comprehension. And as a result, comprehension suffers. Imagine if every 5th word a student read was like this. They could sound it out, but they had to really work at it. It's not enough to be able to be accurate with your words. You have to be automatic. And you get that way through practice. Now, the way we measure automaticity is speed of reading. You might, I'm sure you probably do something like this in the UK. If you're working with 9-year-olds, say, for example, at the 50th percentile, you would expect a 9-year-old to read grade appropriate material in January, the winter months, at about 92 words correct per minute. By spring, they should be up to 107 words correct per minute. That would be an indication that they're adequately automatic in their word recognition there. But the problem is with this is that we don't teach automaticity by working on reading speed. Here in the United States, we have many well-meaning teachers who try to develop automaticity by getting out the stopwatch and getting kids to read faster. And what happens is kids get to read faster, but they don't become better readers. We want kids to develop reading automaticity the way you and I developed automaticity, which is we read a lot, lots and lots and lots of practice. So we really want to shy away from that notion of let's try to read faster than the day before. If you become automatic in your word recognition through lots of practice, you will automatically improve your speed here. Now, the problem with fluency, though, as I mentioned, is it's actually made up of these 2 sub-competencies. The other one is called prosody. That's a linguistic term, what it refers to as expressiveness. If I think about somebody who's a fluent reader, it's not somebody who reads fast, it's somebody who uses their voice to make meaning. I love this quote by the poet Maya Angelou. Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with shades of deeper meaning. And here's a nice example of that I use a lot. The word dude, our young people use it a lot. It can mean different things depending upon how you express it. If you were to say hello, or a teenager would, it'd be dude, right? But if you were to express consternation and disappointment, it might be dude. If you're to ask a question, it would be dude. If you just won the lottery, it'd be dude. It's the same word, but it expresses different meanings depending on how you say it. And by the way, how you phrase it. Here's a sentence. Read the sentence to yourself. You know the words, you know the meaning to the words. Do you know what the sentence means? Probably not. And the reason is this notion of prosody or phrasing. You want to phrase it this way, the old man, in which case, where's the verb, right? What you have to do is phrase it slightly different and read it this way. The old man the boat. A bunch of old people are getting on a boat. And of course, it's a contrived sentence, but it shows that, good readers have to phrase a text. And if you think about children who are not so fluent readers, they tend to read in that word by word manner. The old man, the boat, they don't phrase anything. So we want to develop that phrasing as well. The way
All right. We will stop right there with Rosinski. I think he dates himself a little bit by thinking young people are still using this word dude pretty consistently. And instead of sending you to a breakout room, what I had to ask you to think about as you work through this piece of content was the following focus question. Dr. Rosinski builds the case for fluency. That includes automaticity and prosody. What evidence and examples does he use to support his claim? And if there's somebody who feels brave and wants to volunteer an answer to that, that'd be great. Whole group among 31 strangers. All right, that was my wait time, especially since we're online. But I think he does impress upon you, right? Fluency is not just speed reading, that there's another element this. And I think those of us who've worked with enough children understand that there are a lot of kids who can read quickly across the page and not have a clue what they've just read. And that it's a much bigger lift if they have to read with prosody. And so that gets to, again, we understand the value of fluency that is built by Holbrook and then Rosinski. And if we're sold on the value of it, if we're convinced that, in 2000, the National Reading Panel seemed to have adjudicated this issue for us, how do we go about doing it? Whoops. One more reminder about the importance here, where Rosinski is pointing out that when comprehension suffers, a good chunk of it can be dependent on whether the kid could actually read the text fluently. So here are typically the 5 models of fluency that are most popular and used in our classrooms. And this is from 2nd grade, where we're nurturing automaticity, all the way through 12th grade. So we model it. So we'll take a text and we'll read it with some kind of expression for our students. We do some kind of assisted reading, and these processes: choral reading, echo reading, paired reading. Paired seems to be particularly popular in an elementary school where you have a stronger reader read with somebody who might be a little particularly challenged. We do a lot of wide reading practice. So, I'll pick on myself for a moment. We're going to read something. I may model it for them, and then I'll ask the students and partners to read it themselves. But when we say wide reading, it means that they read it. They're reading one thing on Monday, but an entirely different thing on Tuesday. We have repeated reading or deep reading practice. And you'll see there's reading theater. That's not the only way to get to repeated practice or repeated readings. Another one that I encourage families to do is songs, if the kids are into it. And then, of course, there's speeches, there's poetry. And then we have this idea of focus on phrasing with high frequency words. So these are the most popular ways. But some of these practices, now that we've gathered a lot of research since 2000, may not always get what we want. So from a research perspective, this is frequently what wide reading looks like. This is the idea of we're reading something different every single day. And you can see down here illustrated with A, we may see some gains, but they're marginal. And then sometimes frequently those gains are lost. And then over the course of a school year, rather than getting what we think we're going to get, which is real significant gains because our kids are reading fluently or practicing fluency, it doesn't always really get what we want. Instead, this is what repeated reading research looks like. And this is where I'm standing on the shoulders of people like Rosinski and Holbrook, but also Dr. Chase Young, where here's that repeated reading with text A. In this case, it could be poetry, it could be lyrics, it could be reader's theater. And what we ultimately want, and this is a Dylan William point, we want learning. So if this is what it looks like with A, then we see some transfer when we move to a new text. And this is B, and that's exactly what we see. That over time, kids become increasingly strong at reading something, but it's pretty dependent on kids reading the same text over and over and over again until they're at that place of automaticity and prosody. So again, a lot of research on the value of fluency, but not just fluency. Some practices seem to be stronger than others, and deep reading or repeated reading seem to be the strongest. So here again, going back to Rosinski and his claim, those kids who participated in research around reader's theater or poetry tended to grow at quite a clip relative to the kids who were not using a strategy such as this. So if 25 words correct per minute, as you saw on that read naturally chart, is what you would typically see, we're seeing gains that are greater than 100% of that. So the protocol that I employ in my classroom to nurture this repeated reading piece, and in this case, using Reader's Theater, looks like the following. And this is based on the work of Dr. Chase Young. So on Monday, and I'll show you some of these scripts in just a moment, I will hand out the scripts to the students. So if you've forgotten from way back in the beginning, I'm a 5th grade teacher, so I will often just describe for the kids what the scripts are going to be about. And then they will choose which script they want, and they can put themselves in groups. And then some instances, I have to put them in groups. So that's Monday. They get the script, and then they read all the way through it. On Tuesday, they get into their group. They've read all the way through the script, and that's when they're going to pick their role. There's a lot of Rochambeau in the classroom as kids negotiate what they want to actually read through. And then once they've selected that, I'll have them highlight their parts, and then they'll read through their script with their group. I give my kids about 10 minutes for this, so I'm not yielding a lot of instructional time. So frequently, and I'll show you this in just a moment, my students are able to make it through these scripts at least once, sometimes 2-3 times in that same period. So they practice it Wednesday and Thursday, and then by Friday, I put them back in their groups. They'll practice their scripts one last time, and then they'll perform for the classroom. Not always for my classroom. Sometimes I'll farm them out to other classrooms, so they're reading for kids in those K2 bands, and they're modeling for them not just automaticity, but prosody. And this is where ChatGPT has been so incredibly invaluable in terms of what I'm trying to do. So those of you who use sort of core reading programs know that Reader's Theater scripts tend to be incredibly long. And they're really hit or miss on what content they're covering. So in a moment, I'm going to show you how I use ChatGPT, but just be aware that the scripts that I'm talking about so that we can use this or do this pretty quickly are short. And that's where I say that we can do this. We can get to repeated reading over and over and over again. So yeah, there we go. So I'm assuming that you can see this is my website, just2teachers.com. Everything here is free. We'll refer back to it in just a couple more times. But if I go into ELA and literacy, I click on Reader's Theater. I've written a bunch of scripts, I being in italics. ChatGPT has written scripts for me, matched to major content areas for my grades, or things that I know that they'll see throughout the course of their educational careers. So we are starting at the very beginning of the school year with early people. Here's a bunch of, and again, if you teach 5th grade, you know this content well, Land Bridge, the ancient civilizations that you study to remind kids that nobody discovered America. Instead, there were first people here. So, and these civilizations tend to be pretty advanced. And if I click on one of these, when I say short, they're short. So in this case, we have 4 characters, and that they're able to get to this content and do repeated reading in my classroom multiple times before they ultimately get to presentation. So those are those scripts themselves, leveraging that idea of repeated reading. But then if you notice there, I'm also trying to leverage content, either I'll be sharing with them in real time or that they're going to ultimately get to later. So this gets to what I think probably a lot of you are here for, is a demonstration of exactly how this works. So we're going to open up ChatGPT. And when I open up, whoops, I did it again. We're going to open up ChatGPT. If you're unfamiliar with ChatGPT, there's 2 versions that are currently available to you. One is totally free. The other one is, I think, a $20 subscription fee. For my purposes, all I ever use is free. I will share this as the presentation if you have any trouble finding ChatGPT. And what I'm going to ask you to do is think about some piece of content that you've been working with recently, and if you can put it in the chat field. And what we're going to do is we're going to use ChatGPT to write to your piece of content right now so you can see the ease of it. And again, it requires no special understanding. So one brace. So somebody put 13 colonies. Emotions is a little bit trickier. Give me a couple more. Somebody just said Nevada, animal habitats. Interestingly, I do have stuff up there on animal habitats. And so if I do 3 branches of government, so that gets more specific. So I think it's going to be a little easier. Ecosystems, communicable diseases. Don't really share that with my 10-year-olds. So I'm going to guess that's a secondary teacher there. But I'm going to pick this one, the 3 branches of government, largely because of how narrow that is. So one more time, we're going to open up a LAN or my web browser. Here I am in ChatGPT. So I'm going to write fifth grade reader script about the 3 branches of in this case, I want to have just 4 speaking parts. Oops, I don't know how I did that. Have 4 speaking parts. And then this is sort of the stuff that you kind of figure out if you use it, pretty frequently, which is I want non-gender specific names, largely just because if I'm going to put kids in groups randomly, I don't want to have an argument with them about some concern about what role they're playing. So we're going to have, 4 non-gender parts, each with an equal number of lines or words to share. And I'm going to remind ChatGPT one more time, Lexile level should be no more than 840. So then we hit enter and then the magic. Although it just gave me 8 parts, so it got confused by something I shared. But this is the ease and the quickness of which it's going to generate this script for me. And probably what I left out is it's pretty short right now, so I probably would have wanted, so it accidentally generated 8 roles for me. So I'm going to go back to just 4 speaking parts and make it about 500 words in length. If you've heard in the past that ChatGPT will hallucinate, so now it made the correction for me. Here's the 4 speaking parts. We have Alex, Riley, and Taylor, and a narrator. You're going to have executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch. So I think you kind of get the point, which is it just generated for me a script that will reinforce fluency, reinforce the content that where they won't just see in 5th grade, but they'll also see it again in 7th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. And so they're going to have more content knowledge. They're going to be stronger at comprehending. They're going to be stronger at fluency. So I'll pause right there. And then, so how accurate it is with the Lexile. So a couple of things, and I'm really glad that somebody asked that question in my last 10 minutes here. I'm going to share this one more time. The more you use with ChatGPT, you can always ask it, what is the reading level of your script? And it will tell you. So I'm going to scroll down. So it did tell me it's a reading, and so it's doing its own, probably a flush Kincaid is probably what it has access to. So it does verify that. And then you can also ask it, is everything accurate? So sometimes it will acknowledge when it makes stuff up. So you just have to ask it, did you make anything up? When I wrote the scripts for First People, frequently would say, I just had to guess. And I would say, take out the guesswork. Can you strip it of anything that you had to guess at? And it will eliminate that for you. So I'll go back to my presentation. So I wanted to show you some examples. I also wanted to make sure that if you're unfamiliar with just2teachers.com, all the examples are there. So these are the ones that I've written. If you're familiar with the core knowledge resource, you know that they read about Shakespeare. So that's where I had generated a script to make sure they had the background knowledge on Shakespeare. And again, it's going to either be used as a chance to review or preview, or in some instances, work through a piece of content in real time. I'm going to show you one more thing before I leave it, which is I can also say the following. Write 15 subject, or write a worksheet with 15 sentences about animal habitats at the 3rd grade level, because I think that's where you get that. And somebody put that in the chat field. So they're going to give me a worksheet, 15 sentences. Make sure the sentences are at the 3rd grade level. Students, circle the subject and underline the predicate. And then we just get exactly what, reinforcing a piece of content, but also reinforcing one of our third grade standards within the Nevada Academic Content Standards. So obviously not just a vehicle to get to Reader's Theater, but we're always reinforcing content, always an opportunity to reinforce different things that we're working on with our kids. All right, so my instructional goal at the very beginning of my presentation, if I can pull this up, I wanted to make sure that you understood the importance of Reader's Theater, or excuse me, the importance of fluency, understand how you could use Reader's Theater in order to promote fluency in your classroom, and then ultimately see how ChatGPT could get you opportunities for repeated reading within your room, reinforce content, and then obviously get to what Hausbrook and Rosinski were driving at, that is having kids reading, not just for automaticity, but also for prosody. And I will stop there and answer any questions before handing it over to Dr. Dave Brankamp. All right, seeing no questions, Dave, if you want to remind them of what they have to do to get credit for participating in this particular session, and then just a big thank you for everybody for hanging out with me and learning kind of what happens in my classroom and things that you can be bringing into your classroom.
And a big thank you, Aaron. Appreciate all of your time to be with us in the middle of a Saturday afternoon. I've already dropped in both the evaluation and the attendance. That's what our teams need. Mark Rincon will be in this room coming up next. He's going to do it's kind of an NDE update on what's happening in the ELA and what's around that you may want to be involved in. But make sure you get those in, because then after that last one at 4:10, we'll all go back in, and that's where the raffles will occur and a couple special announcements and so on. But Aaron, really appreciate that. Was a lot of amazing information. Hopefully, I was tickled, and Aaron knows I'm a math person by trade, so I was having fun watching that last part too and seeing what you could do with the ChatGPT. So hope everybody appreciate it. Thank you so much, and thank you guys all for being part of it and participating. Those who did in the breakouts.
Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and good luck with your raffle.
Yeah, we won't be on the odds, right? Thanks, everybody. Those of you coming in or just wrapping up from Aaron Grossman's, Mark Rincon will be back in this room and doing an NDE update around ELA. So catch your breath for a minute. We'll start that about 4:10, or not 4:10, sorry, 3:10. Problem when you're back on Houston time, my phone's playing with me. We'll start the raffle and the wrap up at 4:10.